So today I'm going to share with you a technique that I use when I'm teaching intonation. It didn't have a name before today, but now it does. It's called the physical approach. Right, let's start. Bored, arrogant, boring, peremptory, hectoring, abrupt, impolite, brusque, whining, aggressive. These are all words that have been used in learner English that Alison mentioned earlier by Swan and Smith to describe how learners of English sound or can sound when they use intonation that is somehow unnatural or non-native. So given the seriousness of such accusations, it's obviously incumbent upon us as teachers to make sure that they leave the classrooms sounding less so, or at least sounding more natural and native. So, one of the ways that Adrian Underhill, again I'm repeating everything that Alison has said earlier, but in Sound Foundations, what Adrian Underhill says is that pronunciation can become visual as well as intellectual, and that we need to make it more visual. And he goes into an awful lot of detail about sounds and individual sounds. I think we can bring this to intonation as well, and in fact he also does the same thing. He recommends using maybe something like this when we're writing up the words on the board. Fantastic, so that they can really see not just the main stress, but also the movement of the voice, coming from an upper to a lower intonation. I find that music, it seems like an instinctive way to show intonation as well. And in fact, this is taken from, I think, New Headway Intermediate. They now use this Music of English little section to discuss their word stress, sentence stress, and intonation little sections in the unit. And I often use this in my own classes. So to make it visual, I'll very quickly draw up on the whiteboard the little music notes of fantastic so that they can really see it. And I find it very helpful to also put up another version. And even for students who don't read music, it's not terribly important. They can still see the difference between fantastic and fantastic. And we get a discussion going about sarcasm and lack of sincerity and how intonation is so important to bring meaning to what we're saying. Another thing that I use is a heartbeat monitor. Very easy to draw on a blackboard or on a whiteboard. Blackboard days are definitely gone, thankfully. But yeah, so the students know that they're aiming for the higher intonation rather than the flat line. They know what that means. So it's quite effective for getting them to think about their intonation at least. But we need to make it more than that. I think I was kind of slightly unsatisfied with that. So again, I went to the expert, Adrian Underhill, who says that we should experience sounds and sequences of sound in a personal, physical way. So looking at how we can make it physical, I found inspiration from these guys. Some of you will recognize them from, if you're like me, a child of the 1980s. This is what you're about to see is two of the characters who formed part of who I am, certainly, maybe part of who you are today as well. Okay, let's just have a look. Take a trip down memory lane.
Holding her is high to hit with, sometimes seems so strange to start with. You know, like? Holding her is high to hit with, sometimes seems so strange to start with. You know, like? Holding her is high to hit with, sometimes seems so strange to start with. You know, like? Holding her is high to hit with, sometimes seems so strange to start with. You know, like?
I had no idea they were so Cork. I don't think they were always so Cork. Maybe that's how the rebel pride is instilled. Just you don't realise it's happening to you, and then one day you find yourself giving a presentation showing the tongue twisters in Corkish. Okay, but on a serious note, we can learn something from this, and I think that's probably what I thought of when I thought of making intonation a more physical activity. And you can see there that the higher their intonation is, the more their necks rise. I don't know which comes first, but it's quite helpful. Obviously, we can't manage the whole neck extension activity, but we're going to try and make it physical in some way. So, for this, you're going to need a little bit of space if you're willing to get involved slightly. Can you just, for health and safety reasons, make sure that you've got space to move up and down on your chair, so that you might need to push the desk out a little bit. Thank you. You can stay sitting, just make sure that you have the space. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just take an example of how you can use it. Let's do the first example with polite requests. That's something that we often use when we're teaching polite requests. We often use, we bring intonation into it. So taking the example, would you mind turning that down a bit? I've just realised that as I sit down, I'm probably going to go out of view, but maybe that's effective for the video purposes. It'll be like the tongue twisters. Okay, so polite requests, I guess they tend to start with a higher intonation generally, just to be that bit more polite. So you could start this from a standing position, but I think it's more effective because we need to go, would you mind turning that down a bit? So we're going to go from sitting to standing to sitting. Okay, so like this. Would you mind turning that down a bit? Okay, shall we try together? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Would you mind turning that down a bit? Okay. This is exactly how it works in a classroom situation. Usually I don't have 30 people, but you find that without doing the activity, because I'll often do it where we'll do the activity, we'll do it just in a seated position, and you get a little bit of intonation difference, but not a whole pile. So the standing up, sitting down thing seems to work quite effectively. Let's try another example. Contrastive stress. So somebody says, how was your weekend? And you say, it was great. And then you return the question, you say, how was your weekend? Maybe a bit dramatic, but let's try it anyway. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. How was your weekend? Perfect, okay. Another example is with question tags. That's the typical one where we use the intonation for the tag at the end, either rising or falling. So for this one, we're going to have to start standing. So it's going to be, you don't know where the loo is, do you? All right? Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3. You don't know where the loo is, do you? I like that we all had to sit down on the word loo. I didn't realise that would happen. Okay, moving swiftly along. That's the easy question tag. Everybody knows that the hard one is going from a higher to a lower, so in the falling intonation. So it'll be like this. You haven't done your homework again, have you? Okay. That's right. 1, 2, 3. You haven't done your homework again, have you? Okay, very effective. That is the hardest one that they struggle with, and I think the idea of making it a physical activity just makes it that bit more obvious to them what they actually have to do with their voice. The voice mimics the body. A couple of people have mentioned today the need to use your body more in the classroom for various and particularly for pronunciation. It's quite effective. It's such a physical, visual thing anyway. Okay, we'll do one last one. Let's have a conversation. If I can play the total teacher and get a division going between maybe from this gentleman here over and here. So if you guys want to start, and you're going to be saying, how was your weekend? So you're going to have to start standing. As you wish. Okay, let's go. How was your weekend? And you guys are going to go, lovely, I went to Galway. You've got a slightly harder job. Let's try. Lovely, I went to Galway. Brilliant. Okay, so let's get it going. We're just going to have a straight question and response. Okay, ready? How was your weekend? Lovely. I went to Galway. Brilliant. Okay, that's exactly how it's supposed to work. Okay, your physical exercise is done for the day. You don't need to go to the gym later. I should stand back up for this. Okay, you might be asking yourself, why would you do this? Why would you make yourself look like an idiot in front of all of your students? But we probably do that most of the time anyway. And there are very good reasons why you would do this. One of the main ones is obviously the idea of making it visual and physical brings a deeper understanding of what the students are expected to do with their voices. And I suppose depending on the students and where they come from, what their first language is, they'll have different difficulties with intonation. Some of them will perhaps have too many rises in a sentence, or some of them will have the monotone, the boring words that we looked at earlier. And the visual and the physical really emphasizes either the limits of what you should do with your voice or how far you actually have to go with your voice, which is perfect for kinesthetic learners, as we all know, and even for learners who aren't so kinesthetic. It's memorable and it's fun, and it's something to change up the pace of your teaching with. You can stick it into lots of different activities. Intonation is something that you can bring into lots of different, maybe functional language classes or grammar classes, depending on what the case may be. And that's me. Thank you very much for listening.